Hey guys, I'm back with Red Paladin guide for Legion pre-patch. This is patch 7.0.3. I'm going to be going over just basic changes in pre-patch and how you should be playing currently. I'm going to go over spells and abilities, new talents, what stats you should be looking for, and then the rotation for single target and AoE with a little demonstration. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start with the talents and, well, not glyphs anymore, but the talents. So in the first tier, we've got, for single target, you're going to want to use Execution Sentence. It's the biggest damage. It takes 3 holy power, and after a delay, it does damage. So it no longer does ticking damage that increases, but instead now does just damage after a certain period of time. For AoE, you're going to want Final Verdict. Right now, Consecration not really worth using at all, even for AoE. It just does its damage too slow, things have to stay there, and it's just go Final Verdict faster, easier, and it allows you to do more with Templar's Verdict in case you need to use that, say, the adds die. In the tier 30 talents, you want to use Fires of Justice by default. It just buffs your Crusader Strike, makes it shorter cooldown, and a chance to buff one of your like Templar's Verdict or your Holy Power spenders. Makes it cost 1 less by chance. Just a passive thing you don't really have to watch too much. And then for AoE, you use Zeal, which replaces Crusader Strike, and just keep hitting the same target with it, and it'll chain extra attacks to things. So for AoE Zeal, for right now, Greater Judgment is not really worth using. Just make sure Judgment cleave even more. So right now your Judgment, which we'll get to in a bit, cleaves 2 other targets besides your main one, and this makes it hit 2 more, and then makes it do critical strikes against targets that are above half health. Not the best right now. The half health thing, they don't last that long currently, and it's just not quite worth using in this current time. So tier 45 is just your CC tier. You can pick whatever you want really. Blinding Light is pretty decent for AoE CC, and then Fist of Justice for faster stun cooldown. Nothing really important here for your DPS. Level 60, you want Blade of Wrath for most situations, both AoE and single target. The Divine Hammer talent can be used for like super heavy AoE, but even then you could probably get away with using Blade of Wrath instead, and Virtue's Blade never worth taking currently. Blade of Wrath, what it does is it's a new spell that we'll get to in a second, but it lowers the cooldown on it, which is really important because it generates holy power for you, so you have it up more often, which of course allows you to use your holy power spending abilities more. Level 75, there's only one talent that really increases your DPS at all, which is Justicar's Vengeance, so this is why we pick it pretty much all the time. Word of Glory is just a heal spell. It's the same from WoD. It's a talent now. And then Eye for an Eye, it's like a counterattack type cooldown. You take damage, you counterattack them, but it doesn't really do that much for you. Justicar's Vengeance is a 5 holy power ability. You will not use it unless you have a proc from the talent down here, Divine Purpose. So when you get it for free, it's not really worth using otherwise, because it doesn't do enough damage per holy power. The next tier talent, you've got a choice between movement speed, between these 2 talents, and then Divine Intervention for survivability. Divine Intervention, if you are getting hit a lot, like AoE damage, you're afraid of dying, and you don't want to waste time popping a CD on your Divine Shield, you take this and it pops it for you when you get low. It helps you survive like unexpected damage spikes. If you want movement speed, I suggest Divine Steed. It's kind of like your Speed of Light from WoD. Except it's on it lasts 3 seconds, but you move quicker, rather than the, I believe, 7 or 8 seconds that that Speed of Light used to do. So it just lets you speed away to wherever you need, like on Archimond, and still on the same cooldown. Seal of Light, I don't suggest. It's another speed buff but it takes holy power, so it's taken away from your damage, which is never really a good thing if you can avoid that. So I recommend Divine Steed for movement, speed purposes, and then Divine Intervention if you're worried about dying. And then the last tier, right now, Divine Purpose is pretty much the only thing worth taking. It's just like it was in WoD. Pretty much you spend Holy Power and you have a chance to then get a buff that allows you to spend or to use any Holy Power spending ability for free. Right now, Crusade, which replaces your Avenging Wrath, your only cooldown, it takes too much time to ramp up, and so even though you get damage and haste, you don't get the full benefit of it till later in its duration, which is really unfortunate, and just just takes too much time to ramp up. That's not worth using right now. And Holy Wrath, you have to get really low to use this big cooldown to do a bunch of damage, which is really dangerous. Of course, if there's any sort of AoE or something happens, and you could die really easily, and it's just kind of a pain to use. And even then, it doesn't really measure up that great, unless you're, in one of those super farm guilds that are killing bosses in under a minute, and maybe like you burst it in the first 15 seconds. Then, if you could find a way to get your health low, you might be able to like pass big numbers. But in general, not worth using right now. Alright, and so that's the talents that we'll be using. As far as spells and abilities, let's go over the damage ones first, then your cooldown, utility and healing, and then just a couple mentions on the buffs that Ret Paladins have. So, of course, we still have Crusader Strike as our main holy power builder. Now it has 2 charges, and with the Fires of Justice, it also has a chance to reduce the cost of your next damaging, or your next holy power spender by 1. So your Templar's Verdict would be 2 holy power if you had that buff, for example. And then we have Blade of Justice is the default. Blade of Justice is what it's called now. If you take the talent Blade of Wrath, it becomes Blade of Wrath. And this is a short cooldown. It's got a little range on it, so it's kind of a range like Exorcism was. And it gives you 2 holy power. So this is your other holy power builder spell, just those 2, so Crusader Strike and Blade of Wrath. Now, Judgment no longer gives you holy power, but what it does instead is it cleaves, so it hits the target and 2 nearby ones, and it does a bunch of damage, and it also puts a debuff on that makes those enemies take more damage from your holy power spending abilities, which is actually linked to your mastery. And so it's really important. This is a really important spell, and we'll get into that in the rotation, but it's changed a little bit, quite a bit, and it's quite important. And then, of course, we've got your holy power spenders. We've got Templar's Verdict, same as it was. 3 holy power, does damage. Divine Storm, same thing. 3 holy power, just as AoE damage. And then we've got your talents. Right now I have Execution Sentence, so it's another holy power spender that takes 3. And like I said before, it after a certain amount of time, it just does a big burst of damage. There's no ticking damage, it just hits all at once when it does activate. And then you've got Justicar's Vengeance. Takes 5 holy power, does a buttload of damage. Only worth using if you have that Divine Purpose proc, though. Not worth using on its own. And then we've got, of course, our only DPS cooldown, Avenging Wrath. Same thing, 2 minutes. Increases the damage and healing you do by a lot for 20 seconds or so. Really good. And then that does it for our offensive abilities. Now we've got some utility here. First, another defensive, or one defensive we have rather, is Shield of Vengeance. The 2-minute cooldown puts a shield on you. If that shield is broken, it blows up and does all that damage to nearby enemies. Kind of a mini cooldown, kind of a DPS cooldown, or not cooldown, but just increase if you can get it to blow up, if you take damage, but be careful, don't die trying to get that shield to explode. But it's there if you need it, mostly I would say defensively. Then we have, of course, Divine Shield, as usual. Just immunes your damage, and we got Lay on Hands for the full heal. As far as utility, we've got our Interrupt, Rebuke, we've got Hammer of Justice still, you've got your Stun, the movement that you can talent into if you do choose to take that. And then you've got your heal, your Flash of Light, and then your Blessing of Freedom will remove CC, so like movement impairing stuff. We've got a Slow now, a Hand of Hindrance. And then you've got a Hand of, or rather Blessing of Protection, which does the same as it does before. It will prevent physical damage on your target, removes physical debuffs, but now it actually does not stop them from attacking. So you can use this freely to remove debuffs or save, say a melee DPS's life, and they can still DPS, so you don't have to, warn them to make a macro to take it off or anything like that, which is quite convenient. We do have our taunts and reckoning, and then we have a little cleanse for poisons and diseases. Now, Ret Paladins are one of the few classes now that still have buffs, active buffs, and they're a little different. So you have 3. There's a Blessing of Might, Kings, and Wisdom. And you can have a total of 3 of these buffs of any kind active at any time. So what it does, the Wisdom gives the person mana. Every 15 seconds they restore some mana. So for a healer, for example, King's gives a shield, an absorption shield, that refreshes every so often. That's for like a tank, for example, or somebody who's taking constant damage on a fight. And then Might just does more damage. It causes people to do extra damage. If you're trying to maximize your numbers, I would use Might on 3 people, and the 3 top DPS, because it does a percentage of their damage. So increases, makes them do extra percentage of the damage they do. There will probably be ideal classes to use this on as well, because it's their attacks a 10% chance to do more damage, but I haven't kind of delved into that yet. But try to use it on your highest DPS classes, probably the ones with the biggest hitting spells. But highest DPS, and it does actually count on SCADA on recount as your damage. So tell them not to fight over that. But it's good for you to have that. So always have those active if possible. Now, you can go ahead and briefly talk about the stat priority that you'll be using as a Ret Paladin. Currently, your haste is definitely your best stat by and far. It reduces the cooldown on your abilities, like Execution Sentence, Judgment, Crusader Strike, Blade of Wrath. It reduces those cooldowns, so you use them faster. You get more holy power, means you do more damage. And it also allows you, once you hit 30%, which is kind of a cap there that you want to aim for, you hit 30% haste, your judgment is up all the time. You can have it up practically 100% of the time, which is really, really good. Now, your next stat after haste is crit, because we'll get into it, but crit is the same as usual. It lets things crit. It affects all your abilities, whereas mastery, which is then the third stat, just increases the damage your judgment does, and of course the damage that your holy power spenders get buffed when you use judgment. It's good, but it just affects only your Templars, your holy power spenders, and it only affects your judgment damage. So haste and crit, and then mastery, and then versatility, not so good. Now I'll just go ahead and discuss the single target rotation, and it's not super complicated, but it can get a little tricky in some situations. So the basic idea is that you want to build up holy power, just like before. You build up holy power and then you spend it on the abilities to take it. Pretty simple. One thing though now is judgment is really important. Before you start using your holy power spending abilities, you want to use judgment. And so it's really important that you do use judgment before you have that buff up or that debuff up before you start spending it, because it does a lot more damage with it up. And if you have to delay using your abilities for like a second or two just to make sure you have judgment rolling, that's worth it. Now the only exception to this is execution sentence. What needs to happen is the debuff from judgment needs to be active when execution sentence is actually doing damage, when it explodes at the end, not when you cast it. So you can actually use execution sentence and then keep building holy power, then judgment later, and then follow the rotation and such. So you never want Crusader Strike to have 2 charges if possible. So you want to keep it rolling and charging up. So you want to build holy power, keep Crusader Strike on cooldown if possible, and then of course you only have 2 options to build holy power. So if you're not using Crusader Strike, use Blade of Wrath. Do not cap your holy power. So that means if you're at 5 holy power, don't use Crusader Strike or Blade of Wrath. Use something else, like spend some holy power, like on Templar's Verdict. In general, if you have the power, spend it on Execution Sentence, where it's very important. Just make sure you'll be able to have Judgment up and running on the ad before this thing explodes. And then otherwise, you spend it on Templar's Verdict for single target. Now, if you ever get a proc of Divine Purpose here, use it on Justicar's Vengeance if possible. Now, if there's a point where Execution Sentence is up and it's been up and it's ready to go and it's a good time to use it, and you get a free proc, and say like Judgment isn't ready yet and it's off, so you'd be losing out on Justicar's Vengeance, I personally right now would just use it on Execution Sentence, because it does more damage, it does a crap ton of damage, and it allows you to still build holy power and just continue with the rotation, rather than spending on Justicars and then having to build up more to use Execution Sentence. The other thing too is just sometimes Judgment will come up more often than Execution Sentence will. So go ahead and use this as much as possible when you've pulled up enough holy power. And then wait for execution sentence till it's ready for the next time. One thing is sometimes execution sentence will be ready and you'll have enough holy power and it'll be say like halfway through judgment. So if you use it then it won't blow up during judgment and you might want to hold it then. What I'll do is I'll hold it, keep doing the rotation, use Templar's Verdict, and then as soon as judgment is over, I know I can't get another hit in with Templar's Verdict, then I will use execution sentence as long as I'm ready for judgment. So to recap, build holy power. Crusader Strike always on cooldown. So build Holy Power though with these two spells, Crusader Strike and Blade of Wrath. Before you spend it, make sure you have Judgment active before the damage comes in. So that includes Execution Sentence. And then procs, use it on Justicar's Vengeance of Divine Purpose. And then just line up your cooldowns, your Avenging Wrath with whatever is going on in the fight with Ring, Heroism, Bloodlust, etc. So I'll go ahead and buff Might here. And then I'll go ahead and demonstrate this. So you start the fight, and we're going to go in, so we build up with the Crusader Strike, and then Blade of Wrath, and then a Crusader Strike. And now I'm going to actually drop Execution Sentence, pop this up, Avenging Wrath, Crusader Strike, and now I've got a proc, so Justicar's Vengeance, then Templars. Now Crusader, build up some more. Now you see I don't have a Judgment right now, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to build up Holy Power, Judgment again, and then just Templar's Verdict. Now see I have Execution, but it won't hit if I used it there, so I'll use Templars instead to get the extra damage. Now here I don't have time to get another one in, another Templars before Judgment, so I'll build up some Holy Power, then I'll use Judgment, make sure I'm not missing that Execution Sentence drop, and then just do the same. Try to build up Holy Power, squeeze in as many Templars Verdict as I can. And you just keep on going like this. So you build up Holy Power, try to pull a little, and then I'll Judgment here. Do damage now. Templars there, and then I got a proc, so Justicar's. Now Templars again, and then you just keep going. Now I have time here, so I can Execution Sentence, and now Judgment to make sure I catch that, and I also have a proc, so I want to use that as fast as possible, so I wanted the Judgment there. And then you just Templar's Verdict as long as this Judgment buff is up. I actually tried to squeeze one in there and I missed. You try not to do that. Judgment again, do damage, drop your Templar's Verdict, build Holy Power, Crusader Strike and such. I squeeze one more in there in that debuff, and now I will drop Execution Sentence. And one thing about Avenging Wrath too, you actually only need to have it active when Execution Sentence drops. So I use it here and I get the buff. You see I did 174k. So all you need to do is have all your stuff active when Execution Sentence actually does damage for that. Now here, I could use it. Now it's about to line up, so I'll actually use Execution here. And then I'll Judgment in a little bit. I tried to build up Holy Power if possible before using Judgment so that I can squeeze as many Templar's Verdicts or whatever else comes up in that time frame, rather than getting one off and then spending all the rest of the time trying to build power. Here I squeeze one more Templars in, and then I will go to Execution as soon as I can. And this is how your rotation goes. So you're just building Holy Power, making sure you have Judgment up before the damage from anything that spends Holy Power comes in, meaning your Templar's Verdict and or Judgment, or Execution Sentence. And then using procs, of course, Justicar's Vengeance. Very, very nice damage there. Now, one thing to note, you can check your timers, but Execution Sentence right now for me procs after 6.4 seconds. So if I Judgment and then Execution Sentence, it will still go through. It will hit during that time. I just prefer not to spend that global on it, so if possible. So I try to Execution Sentence prior to Judgment if I can. That way I'm not spending an extra global, putting an Execution Sentence on that does no damage until it blows up. Whereas I could have, like here. So I'll put it down, right? I can even build some power in the meantime, and then, Judgment, still get the full damage, and get more Templar's Verdicts in the meantime. So that's your single target rotation. Again, line up your wings. No longer gives you an extra ability. It doesn't give you Hammer of Wrath anymore because it doesn't exist. Just kind of follow that. Make your own Judgment calls, but always try to pull up Holy Power before you Judgment, and then I try to Execution Sentence prior to actually using Judgment. Sometimes it doesn't line up that way. That's okay, but if you're going to do it, make sure the Execution Sentence does not go off after your Judgment has already expired. So that's single target. For AoE, it's actually literally the same rotation. You would probably be using Final Verdict rather than Execution Sentence, which just takes out another button. But instead of Templar's Verdict, you'll just replace it with Divine Storm. And in those cases, if you get free procs from Divine Purpose, If there are at least 3 enemies, I recommend just using Divine Storm. Keep it simple. If there are less, so if there's just 2 enemies, then you can use your procs on Justicar's Vengeance. But anything more than 3, especially if you go 3, 4, 5, Divine Storm's just going to do more damage than Justicar's Vengeance. So still Judgment, same thing, like exact same rotation. You still want a Judgment before you start going off in Divine Storms, but you just fold the same rotation and replace Templar's Verdict with Divine Storm. And that is your AoE rotation. As far as add-ons and macros, I have actually just downloaded Weak Auras, which you saw probably during the demonstration. Right now I just have it showing my Judgment and its timer. And you can use something like that, like a tracker. I would recommend having a tracker for your Judgment timer at least, and if you really need it, your execution sentence as well. But it just helps you not have to look at their bars the whole time, like eagle-eyeing and squinting at the timer. You can focus more on the fight, and it just lets you know, okay, I've got this much time left. Can I squeeze in another attack? Macros I'm not really using right now because there's no need. I do have like a macro here, it's a PvP one, but I have a mouse over, a couple mouse overs for like Blessings of Protection and Freedom. The buffs, you don't really need them because they last an hour, they last through death. You don't have to reapply unless someone leaves the raid, so don't really need to keybind those even. And yeah, so those I don't really use many macros, and there's a few add-ons I use, just Weak Auras right now, and Omni CC for the timers, for like actual numbers on the timers, so you can get a better idea of when stuff is coming off cooldown. So I hope you guys enjoyed this guide. I hope it was helpful to you in your pre-patch adventures. I hope everyone's having a good time with that. If you liked the video, feel free to hit the like button, leave a comment, ask me questions. I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. And if you guys like videos like this and want to see more, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Cheers, guys.